Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off XL, where we've gone back to September of 1992 to look at the 5 main Amiga magazines to try and find some gems, and attempting to wow us are Amiga Format, Amiga Action, CU Amiga, the one for Amiga, and Amiga Power. Fight! Starting with the one for Amiga, who packed a lot into just 2 discs. We had 3 demos, 3 PD titles, as well as an intro. So let's start off with the intro, as it's for Flashback. And it is lovely, even if it is missing the music, which was just amazing on the Amiga, and really made this intro pop. And because it was one of the earlier releases of the game, it had this shortened intro. Our first proper demo is for Match of the Day. Yes, it's a football game that got the license from the popular BBC Footy Show. And what has it resulted in? Well, it's a football management game, where you have to organise your time each day by dragging in the actions that you want to do into the diary. Now, most of these won't actually do anything in the demo. You might get into it thinking you can do something, and then all the actions inside are blocked off. But eventually, as you keep going through each of the days, you will get to the match day. And yeah, all you get in this is a result. The magazine informs me that in the full game, you'll get to see the whole match play out in this top-down arcade style, but you'll have to just imagine it for the demo. Now, overall, this seems like a decent enough take on the management genre, but I don't think it's enough to make me want to put any real time into the full thing. Moving on, and we have Tiny Squeaks, a game that I believe was also named the Brainies in some regions. And as hinted by that second name, this is a puzzle game, in which we have to guide a number of coloured squeaks to the same coloured spots in the level, which you'll do by selecting one and then moving it around. Now, this follows the puzzle trope of a moving squeak will only stop when it hits a wall or another squeak. And I do like it that when the critter enters the right square, they go to sleep. Now, there are multiple levels to this demo, and it gives a good idea of what to expect from the full game. And this is full of a wonderful sense of personality. But it's also packing those early 90s puzzle ideas that they need a timer and lives, which I know some of my viewers really hate, and I have to say I'm not a big fan of them myself. But I will admit, I did enjoy playing this one, and for the most part the timer didn't get in the way, but I know on some of the later levels it was going to be a real pain. We get some PD next in the form of Nebula, The Wars of Europa. And for a freeware title, this is very impressive, as it's a 3D shooter, where you get to fly around and attack these 3D modelled enemy craft. Well, I say 3D, you don't get to go up or down, it's mostly just left or right or forward and back, but it is still very impressive, because you even have things like cloaking. And your goal is to fly around and try and find the rigs and then destroy them. But you can't take them down with your blaster like you can everything else, instead you have to drop an AER bomb, then fly away and detonate it. Now, this is nice and fast even on a stock Amiga 500 Plus. And even if it doesn't seem like there's too much depth to it, I did have a lot of fun playing it, and I'll definitely have to return to play it some more. Jumping to the next disc, we find a demo for an absolute classic, Premiere, a game that I've reviewed, and I think we might have seen a demo for this in a previous episode as well. But what makes this one interesting is the map feels like it's more of a remix of the first Western level than being a cut down version of it. as while it starts off the same, some of the graphics are different. Now this even includes the HUD, and in the demo we even start off with some dynamite. Now I did notice that some of the baddies seem to respawn, which is a bit of a problem when you have limited ammo, and it doesn't even give you too much more in the demo either. And it also seems that the only door that you can enter is the last one that you'll find in the demo, and that will end it, which does make this a bit of a short one. But it does show off quite a bit of what makes this a great game, as you can jump between the foreground and the background like you can in the final thing. But it doesn't have the back stages, which is a bit of a missed opportunity. Now it's quite possible that this was early in development, so they didn't even have that in place yet. But what they did have was switches, which will even do the thing that you'll get in the final game, where some of them will drop something on your head. It's a bit of an odd demo all told, but it would have gotten me really interested in the full game. But it definitely didn't wow me as much as the final thing. And the next PD game is War. Huh! What is it good for? Absolutely a setting for a game.
Ability level selected. Rating. Helpless.
This is a shareware title that basically tells you that if you don't read the instructions, then you're gonna be wasting your time. As this appears to be a semi-complex strategy board game, where you'll get to play against someone else, or against the computer. And they obviously thought it was complex enough that they included a detailed interactive tutorial. Now that was something that very few commercial games were doing at the time. Now I don't think this is quite as complex as they've made it out to be, because you get to move your craft around the map to try and claim territory. And the more territory you have, the more resources you have to build craft and do research, as well as get into diplomacy. Now the first two are quite obvious, the third one, it took me a while to work out what that meant. On top of claiming space, you can also use your craft to attack the enemy, and when you do that, it will take the form of these action games. So you might have to deal with gravity if you're on a planet, or attacking each other in space. And this is where the diplomacy is important, as the more resources you put into it, the more likely you'll get a single shot kill craft that will show up.
The vacancy has been destroyed. You have been defeated. You see both human.
And more often than not, it seems the enemy happens to get it. And to be honest, I think they should have dropped this idea, as it comes close to really spoiling the game. As even on easy, some of these action sequences can be quite difficult, and this makes it so much worse as you can't even avoid it. But I can see something interesting here, as you win by taking down the enemy base and then taking out all their craft. The final PD game is Croak, a Frogger clone that we've seen before, and I think is better than the one that we looked at last month, as it looks nice enough and it even has a few animated touches, as well as some decent sounds. And as far as I'm aware, it has all the features of the arcade game. But I think this might be an earlier version of what we've seen previously, as it doesn't play quite as smoothly, and it's missing some of the environmental audio that we heard before. We now move on to UK Amiga, that across its 2 discs, they provided a full program, a demo, and 4 PD titles. And that bit of software is for Movie Setter. And it's so professional that it even has a copy protection check that will require you to look up the table of words in the magazine, that they didn't even order by page number. This is a video animation package, not for creating animations, but for taking various elements and then putting them together into a final production. As this demo shows, it has this Martian walking around. and it's easy enough to move the keyframes around, and then even add in your own animation tracks, or even play sound effects and do scrolling. There does seem to be a lot of power here, and it's a fun way to build up movies and take up various bits and put them together. And back in the day, I might have actually messed around with this, because I used to make my own animations in Deluxe Paint 3, and I think I could have done a lot more by integrating this into my workflow. And with the magazine providing 6 pages, it shows that this is a complex bit of software, and it would have taken a little bit of time to learn fully, so I'm sure I've barely scratched the surface in the few minutes I've shown it off here. Their only demo is for Catch 'em, an arcade-style platformer in which you have to try and catch the monkeys. In what is an extremely Amiga-looking and sounding game. Now in this first level, you'll do that by finding the food bowl. Yeah, that is a food bowl, with food already inside it. You'll then place it somewhere that the monkey will pass it, as nothing will make you forget someone's chasing you quicker than trying to get some chow. And at this point, you can then bash the poor chimp on the head and then stuff it in your sack. And then obviously, put it in your box. The second level appears to be unique for the demo, which is quite cool, as it has different items for you to pick up and use. Some of them I still have no idea what it is they're meant to do. So there's obviously some element of puzzling in these levels, because you'll need to pick up the right item to work with the right type of monkey, and then you have to get them to the right cage. And you might even need to get them involved in this, as you'll need to get this big ape to move the ladder across so you can actually make it to the cage. You'll also need to be careful, as those little critters, well, they'll be eating bananas and then leaving skins around for you to slip on. Thankfully, there doesn't seem to be any health for you to worry about, but instead, yes, we have that annoyance of being timed. So you are almost guaranteed to fail a level, as you have to try and explore it and work out what you need to do. But I do think the demo gives you enough time. CU's first PD title is Pod, a conversion of the 8-bit game by the original creator just for CU Amiga. And this is what I'd class an arcade shooter, where you're the round object and you can fire out quite the number of bullets. You move around the grid, which will get damaged when an enemy explodes, which is an interesting idea, but it never really got in my way as I was playing. But that might be because I tended to sit at the bottom of the screen. The level lasts a set amount of time, and if you go the distance, then you'll move on to the next one. And with each level you finish, you'll get another life, which is handy as they start to fire back at you quite quickly. And then new types start to show off, and they all have their own movement styles. Now this is a decent enough looking title, and it makes for an interesting game, as you don't have to shoot all the enemies, sometimes you'll just try to avoid them instead. But obviously, you will want to try and attack them, as that's how you get points, as well as reducing the amount of things you'll need to avoid. I've not played the originals, so I can't say how it stacks up to them, but this version seems good enough. The second PD title is Cubic. And with a name like that, there couldn't have been many games it was trying to copy. Yes, it's a Qbert clone. The graphics are nicely done, and even has the elevators along the side. But when you lose a life, the squares all reset, which I don't think is the same as the arcades. Although I'm no Qbert expert, so I could be wrong here, and I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments. This feels like a competent take on the arcade game, and even gives you a couple of options for the controls, considering it's all isometric. It has some nice music and sound effects, and feels like they put a lot of effort into this one. The source material was never my favourite arcade game, but I did enjoy playing this for a few times. The next PD game is one we've seen before, as it's Mr. Wobbly Legs versus the invaders from space. This is a career-winning take on Space Invaders that split it up into multiple parts. In the first bit, you're controlling that Michael Jackson sounding Mr. Wobbly Legs at the bottom of the screen, and you have to run back and forth collecting the item on the right and then hitting the switch on the left. The first few times is to rank you up, as only the top ranked officials can attack the aliens from space. But once you do that, you'll start to collect upgrades for your ship, all while trying to avoid the champ lasers that are flying down the screen. This section ends when you run out of lives, and if you fail to gain the right rank, then it's game over. Otherwise, you'll then get to shoot back at the enemy, with whatever craft and firepower you manage to get from the upgrades. It's a fun, silly game that's actually better than you might expect, as the split gameplay brings some real challenges to the game. And the final PD game for this magazine is Maze. And this isn't a take on Pac-Man, instead it's a 3D maze that you have to solve. And you do this, by all things, using the keypad to move around the maze, which I feel is a little unfortunate for A600 owners. Why didn't they just use the arrow keys or the joystick? I have no idea. But instead, if you couldn't play it, you could enable the demo mode and just let the computer try to solve it itself. Now there are a number of different sizes of the mazes, and it will keep track of the number of moves that you've made. It will even generate a new maze each time. And amazingly, this all moves at a decent pace. But then, in a way I'd hope so, as it is very simple looking. It's not the best game ever, but it might be fun in short bursts. Let's move on to the next magazine, which is Amiga Power, that across its 2 discs gave us 2 demos as well as another PD title. And starting with Captain Dynamo, a platforming game in which we have to travel upwards through the level. And I do think this looks nice enough, and it has a bunch of neat touches. But I do feel that Dynamo might be moving a little bit slowly. But this might be intentional, as he is one of the oldest playable characters in a game at 75 years old. But it doesn't excuse the slightly annoying jump mechanic, as just hitting the fire button will do a standard jump, and to make him jump further you have to hold up and then press fire. I think a tap and then a hold on the fire button would have been a much better way to do this. But apart from that, I can't complain too much, as the things that you can see, well, they're just collected for points and you don't need them to open up the end goal. All you have to do is get up to the top. Now obviously there'll be things for you to jump on, and then cool looking lasers for you to avoid, all while some decent music is playing in the background. Now this is just a single level demo, but the final game is a budget title, so if you enjoyed this, then there was a good chance that you would be able to buy it with just your pocket money. The PD game is Top Secret, a game by The Hidden, the Donk the Samurai Duck people. Now they made a number of games for the magazines, as they had a bunch of spare time due to publishers causing them no end of issues. This is a single screen platformer, in which you play as the robot thief Toppy. Our goal is to collect all the floppy disks in the level. Now this has some definite hints of Rodland, as you can throw the bombs at the enemy, and they will typically go down in a single hit. But you got to make sure you quickly walk over their icons or they will return. So it's a bit more Rodland meets Bubble Bubble. There's also this bird that will take multiple bombs to take down, and depending on where it is can be very difficult to touch its icon, because it has this very lazy flying style, so you might have to wait for it to get out of your way if you don't think you can hit it with your bombs. But if you hang around too long, then you'll have to deal with whatever this is. a meth squirrel? And it will show up and try and track you down. It can't be beaten, just avoided. Overall, this is a fun, if slightly clunky platformer that does throw a bunch of interesting ideas the further you go into it. So good on Amiga Power for paying for a new game to be made. The final demo for the magazine is Beastmaster. Honestly, that is what the logo says. That at first glance I wondered if this was a Shadow of the Beast clone, due to how the main character moves, as well as all the parallax scrolling that's going on. But it seems there was more to it than that, as you can move vertically as well as horizontally. And then you get to beat up some drunken people. This was done by mostly holding down the fire button and then tapping a direction. And then what at first appears to be a simple beat 'em up turns out to be more complex, as there's a large world for you to explore even in this demo, even if each of the paths do look very similar. I'm not sure going for this all yellow colour scheme was the best idea. But it turns out there's even more to this game than that, as if you hit the right mouse button, then this whole row of icons will show up and let you interact with the objects that you've been collecting, as well as the world at large. I feel that there might be far more depth to this than I first gave it credit for, and might be worth revisiting. The final game got released as Beastlord, so I might have to look that up. Amiga Format is up next, and across its 2 discs we get a single limited demo, as the rest is mostly applications. The first being a full version of IntroCAD. And being a computer-aided design package, this is mostly about drawing images, or circuits, or all sorts of other things to set sizes, so they can be printed out at the best resolution possible, as it's all about line and vector art, as this sample image of an Amiga 1000 shows. And this includes many other CAD projects on the disc that you can load up and check out, and then edit using the various tools that are built in, like lines, arcs, and circles. You can also zoom in and move around the image as you need to. You can also draw parts and then load and save them as needed. As we can see from this circuit diagram, we can just load in a part and drop it in. This is an interesting program that I'm not sure I really would have understood back in the 90s, but I can see how powerful and useful it might be now. Well, on a more powerful machine anyway, it is a little bit slow on an Amiga 500. That limited demo from Amiga Format is for the 3D Construction Kit 2, a bit of software that was so complex that the full version came with a VHS tape to show you how to use it. Now, considering Amiga Format gave this a single page, this was never going to be showing off the full range of what this software could do. So instead, they made a basic game in the engine for you to play. And so we get this 3D world for us to move around to try and find 10 candles, as those are required to light up the tunnel that will let us escape. And while it's a very impressive engine, it's still something that requires a lot of CPU power to really run, so play this on an A1200. But this demo really does show what you can do with the engine, as we start off in this room and then work out how to cross the lava and then get teleported into another open space and then go exploring it. And as a fan of the Freescape engine, and games like Total Eclipse, I would have had a lot of fun playing this back in the day. But after that we have more software for us to look at, such as Disklog, which is effectively a database program for keeping track of your discs. You can then pick one of several labels and give it a rating. These are one of those programs that I can imagine being useful if you had a lot of discs with no idea what was on them, but you'll still need to put them each into the drive and then select the right label and then make sure that it is matching what's on the disc itself. I think you would be far better off just spending some time to write labels on the discs rather than using this. So I really couldn't see me using this all that often, and neither could I see myself using the Personal Finance Manager Plus demo. Definitely not back in the day, as I don't think I really needed this to track my paper round money. As this is a demo, it comes with a single example of how to use it across several accounts, as it shows how you can track things like checks being paid, and you can even set up automations, well, in the full version obviously. But this is sort of guesswork on how much is in your account as you start to track stuff. But you can use it to plot graphs to give you an idea of where you're spending your money, or where your money is going. But obviously it's very much reliant on you entering all the data correctly, but the demo is just showing off a pre-created scenario. So you can see what it can do, but you can't make any changes yourself. The final bit of software looks like it might be more useful as it's the degrader. I feel some might be disappointed to find out that this is actually to enable and disable features on the Amiga. Well, early Amigas anyway, as you can use it to enable and disable various memory modes as well as caches, set the machine to be PAL or NTSC, or even remap the disk drives. This became less useful with the Amiga 500 Plus as it had some of these built in the early start menu. But if you had an earlier machine, this would have been really handy to use. Now the final thing that Amiga Format had was the Eye of the Beholder 2 character editor. So if you wanted to edit the party of characters from a save game that you had, then this would allow you to basically cheat and set their skills, level, health, as well as a whole range of other settings for each of your characters. So if you wanted to remove some of the grind or just make the game a bit easier, you could start off with a super overpowered lot and then just go for it. And finally, we have Amiga Action, that packed its 2 discs with 4 PD games as well as 2 demos. And that first demo is for Goblins. Yes, it's spelt with 3 I's. And this is the first Goblins game, and if I remember correctly, we've seen the sequel in a previous episode, and just like it, this one starts off with a wonderfully animated intro, which leads us into the game where we have to control 3 goblins in a point-and-click style adventure. But the twist is, each of the characters have their own abilities. So you'll need to work out which one is useful where, to try and solve all the various puzzles that will show up. Now in this screen here, we have to use this one to punch the arch to get a horn, which can only be picked up by a different one, but it can then blow the horn on the tree to get a branch. And then the wizard can use magic to turn the branch into a pickaxe. Yes, it is very much weird moon logic, but the interactions are a bit more limited than most adventure games, so I do think it sort of works. Now there are a few screens to the demo, and with how the logic of the game works, you will spend quite a bit of time trying to work out what it is you need to do. So I would have put a lot of time into this demo back in the day, as I do enjoy my adventure games. And this is one of those games that's been on my radar for quite a while. Also included on this disc is a slideshow for the game Tornado. Now I think we've seen playable demos of this before, but this slideshow probably shows the game off just as well as I would if I was actually playing it. But seeing that this is a quiet set of images with no music or sound effects, I think it's time we moved on to the PD. The first of which is Tricks, which is a clone of Quicks. A game that might be the world's most cloned title, as there's a whole genre of adult-orientated games based on this concept. There might even be a few of them for the Amiga, but this isn't one of them, as it's a very basic version of that game. The goal is to move our avatar around the screen to try and capture over 60% of it. You can do this with lots of small movements or try and take larger, riskier ones. But obviously you must avoid the lines in the middle that's formed by the quicks, or the sparks that will run along the edges. This is a fine enough take on the game, but it doesn't do anything really interesting with it, and it does look a little basic. The second PD game is Rollerpede. This I think is a bit of a take on Centipede, where now we're set in space when you're flying a spaceship. But you'll still have to kill critters as they come down the screen, and they'll turn into mushrooms? This game feels a little bit confused, to be honest, as you'll get frogs that will jump along the bottom of the screen, and if you manage to take them out, you'll get power-ups. But there's also flying saucers going across the screen as well. Centipede was never a game I really played all that much, but this version seems fun enough, but I'm not sure I'd return to it all that often. The next game is the imaginatively titled Pac-Man. No prizes for guessing what this is based on, and it's cool that they added music. Shame it sounds like it's in a rush to try and finish. But in-game, it does sound a lot better. And this looks like a decent take on the arcade classic, and I'm not sure the ghost logic is quite right, but they do get quite aggressive when they spot you, so overall it works well enough. But I played it for a bit, I didn't notice any extra layout or mechanics, so overall it's a nice looking and sounding game, but gameplay wise, well, it's not really bringing much to the table. The final PD game of the episode is H-Ball, which is a breakout variant. It's a simple and mostly clean looking version, but it does have some corrupted graphics, which I think is more of a problem with the disc rather than the game itself. But overall, it looks like it's more of a take on Breakout than Arkanoid, as I didn't find any power-ups. But then, I barely got past the first level. And it seems the layouts were a little simple. It has the odd spot sound effect for when you hit the paddle, and overall it moves well enough. Well, as well as some of the professional ones that we've seen previously. But overall, it's not really bringing anything new, or doing anything really all that interesting. This leads us on to the final commercial demo for the episode. Ugh. A game that's looking very polished from the title screen and the animated intro. But from my first attempt at the game, well, it ended almost right away, as I thought I was the thing walking out from the cave. Not the helicopter-like thing that went straight down and crashed. I was off to a great start. It took a few attempts to work out what I needed to do, and that was to move the cave people from one pad to another. So really, this is a caveman version of Space Taxi, where you'll get graded on how quickly you get them to where they need to go, as well as how smoothly you land. All this is to earn money so you can get a ring to woo your beloved cave woman. Now, I've not fully worked out the HUD, but I managed to pick up a rock and then drop it on a tree, which gave me an apple. And I think that apple matches what's on the HUD, and that could be health or stamina. As I said, I've not fully worked this game out. The second level has you trying to dive under the water, which wasn't the easiest thing to do, to try and get to the other side. All in all, this is an interesting take on Space Taxi, and I did have some fun with it, but I'm not sure how much I'd really play it. And with that, we're at the end of the episode. Now, what was my top 3 items that I think we played today? Well, in third, Nebula. Yeah, it might not be the most complex game, but I did have a lot of fun, and it is a fast, fun 3D shooter. In second, War. A mostly complex and intriguing game. I'm not sure how much I'd actually play it, but it is a unique title, and I think it could be even more enjoyable against another person. And in first place, Goblins. I'm a sucker for adventure games, and this is a series that I've known about since the Amiga days, when I played demos like this. But I've not really had a chance to put all that much time into it, and this demo has reminded me that I should go change that. And that was it, my top 3. What were your thoughts? Did I get it right? Did you spot something even more interesting? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was Ugh, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this covetous face-off, as they are a lot of fun to make, and I keep finding new and interesting games. And if that interests you, then you could subscribe to the channel to be informed when new ones show up. Or you could go check out my back catalogue. There should be 2 videos on the screen right now.